Last topic of today, guys. As I understand, we'll let Richard lead with this one because he's been writing some articles on his Substack. We've got to talk about Astralis in Counter-Strike, once proud Counter-Strike titan. Now, as I understand it, failing to make their, fifth consecutive major? Which is insane, considering this team's dominance, as well as their popularity.
Monty, do you want to know a hilarious detail? This is how badly managed they were. Before that, they were one of the famous orgs where their players, people like device, not only were at every major, they were in the playoffs of every major.
Yeah.
They used to have an incredible record. Yeah. Now they've just missed $1 billion.
And also, I would say...
Loads of stickers money lost. So by the way, off the top of my head, 5 majors missed. One of them was one of the biggest in history, by the way. That's probably like... upwards of $10 million or something, like $7 million, somewhere like that. That's a lot of money lost. There's a lot of money lost.
Yeah. And also, like, if you consider the fact that it was almost certainly Astralis that caused many people in Denmark to play Counter-Strike. It probably helped Blast receive funding, being a Copenhagen-based company. So people probably invested in Blast, especially because...
in the first year, I believe, literally the government gave them some money.
Yeah, exactly. Year. And, the Copenhagen, everybody in Denmark has been huge Astralis fans. They were supporting them in, the Royal Arena in Copenhagen. Overwhelming fan favorites there. They've had basically everything going for them. And the latest news is after selling their League of Legends slot last year, they are now on the auction block and trying to sell themselves. And the value of this team has apparently depreciated to between 13 and 20 million Danish kroner. I believe that's how you say the currency, which is about $2 to $3 million US.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being told that currently, I think they're looking for 4 mil,
which is terrible, by the way, guys.
But understand, obviously, this is all relative in terms of like anything that goes to auction. It's worth whatever you're willing to pay for it. It could be
and
less,
what they're selling is
more. It could be a lot more.
Yeah, what they're selling is a lackluster Counter-Strike roster. They already sold their League of Legends spot in Europe, and
they technically own part of it, though.
Oh, that's true.
As far as I know, they own a small percentage of it, maybe like a third of it or something. I think more, the rest of the slot went to like Garmin Corporate. I believe they have like a tiny amount.
Yeah, there's a deal being negotiated now under these circumstances, which is to buy the entirety of it. There's like another payment that's
an obvious one to do.
Be made, and obviously, but basically, it's interesting because what ended up happening was behind the scenes, the LEC slot that was sold. And that went for about £18 million to Carmine Core, whatever it was. They wanted to keep their hand in, but what's happened now, since the NASDAQ delisting, just a bunch of like disastrous financial ramifications from missing things like the major and repeated majors. That's at least $1 million cash injection from the stickers every time, potentially more. So it ultimately the investors have really lost the taste for it. And what they want to do is they just want to flip this now, get the fuck out with whatever they can get the fuck out
especially because the value here is the intellectual property in the name Astralis, and every major they miss makes that value go down. So
what also hasn't helped, and this is why it's very hard for me to sympathize, is Astralis have been utter cunts at every single turn it was possible to be an utter cunt. You have to understand, they're one of the only esports orgs I've ever covered that have engaged in something that would be accurately labeled corporate espionage, in the sense of how they tried to destroy Heroic by working with by the performance coach / whatever the fucking title he had, Casper Hitt, working with Hunden, who was employed by Heroic at the time, to essentially build a team for Astralis, but also share competitor intelligence, which, by the way, I can say all of this because my publication was the one that was able to prove this beyond any doubt. And also, Astralis dismissed both of them as a result of my reporting, and ESL fined them $100,000 as a result of my reporting, all of which leads me to believe my reporting was accurate, right? So, the reality is, I cannot sympathize with where the org is at now, even though the only people being affected are, by and large, a skeleton crew of staff and the players themselves. And I'm friends with, obviously, some of the players, their coach, Rugger, I go fucking, way back with. But unfortunately, Astralis had, like, a source even said it in the article I wrote. They said basically Astralis has to be destroyed for Danish CS to rise again. Because Astralis, they just ruined every other small organization. I'm talking, forget what they did to Heroic when Heroic was a Danish identifying organization. I'm talking about, if you develop talent at an organization like Sprout or Tricked or any, it was gobbled up. It was gobbled up, and you were put under immense pressure to sell. And all the best Danish talent had to be Astralis. Even if there wasn't any direct fuckery or direct pressure. We're Astralis. You're not Astralis. You're Danish. Who do you want to play for? Right. And that's what everyone was up against in the Danish territory. The fact that Astralis were essentially a fucking leviathan that was just swimming through the ocean, swallowing anything else that it wanted. And so I totally agree with that assessment and characterization. So, yeah, I have no sympathy with Astralis. Here's the interesting component, Duncan. My sources have told me the person that is actually checked out and is essentially driving the sale of Astralis is Nicolai Nyholm.
Perfect.
Yeah.
By the way, if people don't know, the reason why that is too on the nose is I never ever bought that this guy ever cared about Counter-Strike esports. He was always one of those people where it seemed like that was just his vehicle to get rich and to go on to the next project. If you don't know, he's an investor in many different companies. Yep. And the crucial detail that we actually revealed on, I think by the time by the numbers was ending, Richard, was that the reason why it's so conspicuous that he's now the one doing this is because I believe it was like a year or so ago that he finally got where his shares were all invested and he'd be at the point where he could leave. Before that, he wouldn't leave because he wouldn't have been incentivized to. So basically, the moment this guy can sort of just waltz off and sell it, etc., magically, now he's in favor of selling. Weird how that works.
I mean, the way I now feel about, right, because you have to understand, I now have come to view my esports career, my 20-year esports career. It's basically a game of Elden Ring. The people I was battling back, when I started, they're just nothing compared to the monsters that we've got in the space right now. Like I'm on the fucking Saudi Arabian government, mate. Like the fucking organisations that weren't paying people £400 from an iSeries back in 2005. It's like they were the starter bosses. And I've come to view Nicolai Nyholm in a very kind of similar way. When I was doing this report, and I reached,
he's a mid-level boss. He's not even the ultimate boss.
Yeah, let's be clear. Let's be clear of what his sins are. He is a liar and a manipulator who operates from a point of self-interest. I think I've just described every business.
You haven't even narrowed anyone down at all.
No, that's it. I think that's everyone in esports in a way. So it's like it's not even that he ever did anything terrible. You can maybe make arguments over
absolutely.
He hired bad people who did terrible things, and you can also make an argument about what they did to that legendary Astralis lineup was really bad, to force them essentially to have to go get doctor's notes just so they could get a break after they've been fantastic servants to the brand, while also supposedly, total lie of course, being co-owners. Because of a very small piece of equity.
Which, by the way, they ran with that story for a long... I actually take that as one of our wins as well, Richard, that we turned people to finally understand that. That's why we kept going on about Nicolai Nyholm, because for many years, they also would have gotten away with it all, because people actually thought that the org was owned by, like, Carragher and Device. Like,
I mean,
that's basically what they were living off.
When I did the Copenhagen event, the Copenhagen major, Nicolai Nyholm was in attendance, and we were at a party for the launch of the CS documentary that they showed there. They had a premiere for it, the one that Tom made. For those you've all seen.
Memories of CS.
Yeah.
Memories of CS Goh, right? Yeah.
Anyway, Nicolai Nyholm was there having cocktails, and I sidled up to him, and we had a very long conversation. It was very nice. It was in good faith. And like I say, like when Christmas comes, we can get out the trenches and we can all have a game of football. I'm about that, and then we can go back and we can get back to shooting each other. That's kind of how I've always viewed what I do. And honestly, I got the impression then, and this seems to be bore out now. This was a guy actually that had probably realized that, like, he thought he was going to come into esports and be slick and have it all locked up. And he did achieve some good things. And he did achieve things, by the way, where it didn't have to be nefarious and it didn't have to be a lie. You know, all of those achievements of Astralis, once they got the Nicolai Nyholm backing, the creation of Blast, these are W's on the Nicolai Nyholm CV.
Also paid a lot of great players a lot of money as well. A lot of your favourites.
And remember, this was a guy, by the way, when he first got into the space, he originally wanted to create a player union and create organisations that he was essentially going to give portions of equity over. Not big portions, but he wanted to create his own league. That was what Blast was originally going to be, where, you know, Fallen had a team and Device had a team and Olaf had a team. All theoretical, right? Just random names I'm putting out. But they would have a brand and they would be the captain of that brand and they would own equity in that brand and they would recruit a team to that brand, but ultimately Nyholm would be controlling it all. And so that to me seemed dangerous, and this is how we ended up clashing consistently over the course of many, many years. But anyway, to the point, the view I got from him, all smiles and having drinks and saying, oh, you know, you should come on a podcast, blah, blah. I got the feeling this was a man who was leaving esports, and he's on the Danish equivalent of Dragon's Den now. He's just ascended. He's like, you know, he tried to lock up esports. He gave however many years of his life to it when he came in, but now he's realised the returns aren't worth it, the stress ain't worth it. There's always going to be a Richard Lewis waiting to fucking fuck up your shit every time you try and do something devious. And actually, I can just go and, you know...
Why not just parlay your business interests you got from Astralis into a bigger business elsewhere? I'm sure that's what his plan is. Yeah, of course.
So
makes sense.
So anyway, the fact that he is now driving the sale, reportedly, makes total sense. Now, I did reach out to him for comment. He didn't reply. I don't know if that's just because he's too busy and he didn't see it, or if he has no interest. But as always, I extended an invitation for him to come on a podcast. Here, I would extend him an invitation to come and be the fourth horseman, and we could talk about Danish esport, you know, especially if you're getting out of it. Now we can just put all the cards on the table. You can tell from your perspective whether you thought we were harsh or not. We can tell you all the shit stuff that we thought you did and why it would be an anathema to people who would organic to esports. You know, we can have that conversation now. But by and large, it looks to me like Nicolai Nyholm and his time in Astralis is ultimately done, and therefore it's no coincidence that they are rudderless right now. You know, like, whatever you want to say about him as a person, as a man, as a businessman, he gave Astralis the direction.
He had a vision, of course.
Well, it's also,
absolutely.
I mean, because Astralis was born out of the shit job TSM did with the core of that team, right?
Yep.
And
couldn't happen without them. Good on you, Reggie. You've done it again.
You know, I do think it takes some ambition and vision to realize what Astralis became as a brand and its importance to Denmark and their kind of unassailable position as the gods of Counter-Strike, right? I mean, they did a good job with it. All that.
I mean, by the way,
done.
that thing I say about paying players well, that is no small feat. As you say, Monty, they're a company from Denmark. They're not Americans. Like, to even get the sponsorships and the actual revenue to be able to pay people like Device as if he was in, like, Team Liquid or Cloud9 is actually very impressive. Like, that's no small feat in itself. Also, they did do other things, like they did successfully parlay their success into getting an LEC slot, which, by the way, seemingly they probably even profited from. That's very rare. If you can profit out of an esports game, you fucking killed it. Secondly, I'll also throw this out there. What was the other thing I was going to put out there? Fuck, wait. There's one other part as well that I could give him credit for. Wait a minute. The LEC.
Brand.
Paying the players.
Paying players.
Oh, there's one more, but I forgot what it was now.
You'll remember in 2
Fuck,
minutes.
what could it be?
Yeah, you'll get
keep
it.
Talking, I'll remember.
You always do.
I do agree that the paying the players thing was huge. It's not like they did wrong necessarily.
Oh, by the way, that's it. The stock market one.
Yeah.
There you go. Because if people don't know, this is one of the areas where actually I am not, as people imagine, someone who like people do to me in CS, where they go, I guess my opinion is whatever the opposite of yours is. I don't actually do that. I'm not a contrarian like that. So I'll give you an example. I, like a noob, like Bobski, would look at the stock market price and go, this price isn't very high. It must be. No. Lurpis, who actually understands that sort of thing, told me if you ever actually saw where their their stock price was, like a year ago or whatever, it was fine. That was actually okay. And if you actually understood when people bought in what their expectations would have been, it was actually an okay amount. It wasn't at the point that like you would actually delisted. They'd survived that period. And in fact, Lurpus even said if you looked at the time, coupled with the LEC sale, they probably at that time were in okay position financially. So it's not even just that because here's what I don't want this to be. Just because I don't like Nicolai Nyholm doesn't mean he was incompetent at every aspect of business. In fact, at certain aspects of business, I've said this before, he did actually play people and beat them a lot of the times and win a lot. By the way,
never
I'll
us.
even give you,
Never
I'll even, well, indirectly us because he did it through Flashpoint.
Yeah,
for me
exactly.
Monty.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
But to be fair, I did warn them the whole time.
Never
You know
me.
this, Monty. I told him the whole time I don't believe it's real, but he did.
That
get them.
also
So,
that
in
also
general,
happened.
yeah.
All of that happened basically before we came on board too. Like all those
Pretty
conversations
much.
and everything.
And
right?
we that wasn't within our purview at the time anyway. I
Well,
was
yeah,
the
we
fucking
couldn't
debate
fix
guy.
it, that's for sure.
I wasn't in those meetings. Yeah, exactly. So, but in general, like I like you don't have to do the Donald Trump thing of like I don't like him, so everything he does is bad and he is an idiot and stinky. You can just fucking call people on the shit they did, mate. And on the shit he did, yes, he was a horrendous liar who at times the closest he came to doing anything wrong, in my opinion, was the thing where it's possible. Let's just say he allegedly might have pressured people to play who were burned out, etc. That's a bit fucked up. But by the way, that's not even itself that uncommon in massive esports.
Also,
Look, as
like
we
kind of a
found,
minor
Nicole-
crime compared
yeah,
to what
Nicole-
happened in League
yeah,
of Legends.
Exactly. Nicole Point Jameson really fucking raised the game on that one.
Yeah,
so you know,
absolutely.
the Warren Buffett of fucking player mishandling.
Well, I'm with you, Richard. Even though to me I hate it, if your biggest crime is lying, that does actually, I'm sorry, that doesn't measure up to things like the Saudi
Nicolai
Arabian
Nyholm, we
state.
call him.
Yeah, exactly.
Nicolai Nyholm.
It's not that big, is it? Come on.
He's having a lie. That's all he does. But yeah, so anyway, right. So he's the one meant to be driving the sale. Where it gets really...
And I still think, even though you think it's cheesy, I don't give a fuck, Richard. My little video I did, where I did like a TikTok, where I was like, his name looks like it's written, Monty, as Nicolaj, but actually in Danish it would be Nicolai, so there's even a lie hidden in his name. I'll forever maintain that straight fire. I don't care what anyone
appreciate
says.
that was-
I'm doing my own reviews on that one. I think that was a bad
Yeah, yeah.
That one's legit.
Great.
Sadly, not a lot of uptake with the kids. Didn't really become sort of a meme like I was hoping, but you know,
Unk
can't win 'em all.
is off his met. I remember.
Basically, unfortunately.
But anyway, so that's the Nicolai Nyholm aspect of it. I think basically he's just looking to move on, and ultimately he's the one saying, look, you know, I'm the competent guy at the company. Now, he has to shoulder a lot of the blame. He has hired absolute fucking idiots every time. I think, honestly, in retrospect, one of his biggest weaknesses was he was like a almost terrible judge of character and what was necessary to succeed in esports, because Casper shit. He's a famous handball player, and you know Nicolai Nyholm's on record. You know, did a YouTube video about this. He was going, from the moment I talked to Casper, he blew my mind by talking about how like even the way players sit on the bus can be important for their performance. And it's like none of that's true in esports, big homie. Like none. Like Casper's finessed you. You hired him, and then of course, obviously, in sort of a visualization of the greater fool theory, Casper shit became enamored with fucking Hunden in a way that was inexplicable. So, you know, it was just this chain of incompetence that ultimately brought Astralis to the point it's at. They brought in this Casper Strauber, the performance coach at Heroic, that was essentially headhunted by Astralis and then used, because of the relationship he had with Stown and Yabby, to do the $2 million stabby fucking deal. Right.
By the way, the most expensive era of their club, because think about it, before that, you already had the players from TSM, and you're just adding like one player every couple of years. The Casper Straub guy oversaw like millions being given away for nothing in return. Almost.
And as I've said, like
Millions.
one of the things I will always love about this, especially now that Casper Straub has been fired, because I think the source said, quote, his salary is too big to justify.
Love that.
Right.
Love it.
So, I mean, that tells you two things. One, they were paying him a fuck ton, and two, what he was doing was dog shit. So I love that.
Wait, that's one last thing I will say, though. One other thing they did that I think was mildly unethical, but only mildly, this is sort of the game in esports, sadly, is they did, as you're saying, I only reference it in light of the fact, as you say, this guy was on a giant salary. Oh, don't worry, Monty. They would do an Astralis where they'd have like device, like bona fide, like Hall of Famer, great player still. They'd have like other really top players, Yabby, and then they'd always have a player in there who was like an academy player, just so he could be on the academy contract.
Yeah.
So he's still playing with the expectations of device, but then he'll be on like, I'm going to guess 5K a month or 3K a month or something. So they would also be like, and then the guy
they would
that
always cut
makes,
them. They would always cut them like 3 months later.
So that does sort of stick in my throat when the guy making the decision to hire that cheapo player than himself.
No, but it was also
another Lamborghini, sir. You know, I don't like that particularly.
It was also predicated on the fact that, again, he was employing people who thought esports and sports are a direct, overlap, like, and it just doesn't work that way. They honestly thought if you put a bunch of if you put a bunch of young Danish players in an academy side and you gave them access to the staff and the resources of the main Astralis side, the players will naturally elevate. That's generally how it works in football, right? Eventually, we could slot in 1 or 2 youngsters here. The problem is when you've got 5 players here and 5 players there, there aren't enough bullets in the chamber for you to keep firing out stars. And then if you're going to spend 2 million at the start of a new game for 2 players unproven in that game, like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that's bad business. And that was the last of the big spending, by the way, that they had. After that, it was kind of like, shit, we just gotta, it has to work, and it didn't.
I mean, understandably, because again, as reference, you never made any sticker money in this time. You never ever get anything back.
Correct. So
and then they killed the partner program. I mean, it's terrible.
I mean, you can go and look on my Substack. I literally, again, all I've been doing the last month, apart from events, has been looking at financial records of orgs. So I've posted Astralis's last publicly filed financial records as part of the report. People can go and see for themselves. There's all the anecdotal stuff's in there. The hardcore numbers are in there. But anyway, just back to the CS team. The other thing that they did, Kasper Strauber. You bring him in, you give him 6 figures, this is meant to be the performance coach that's going to do everything, and then you make Device the IGL. I've never understood this. It's not that Device, who, remember, I've known him a long, long time. I got respect for the kid. It's all of that. But he has a stress-induced medical condition. You take less stress off his plate. You don't put more on it.
And you make him the in-game leader, Monty.
And lo and behold, by the way, and like, I am not saying these two things are linked, because that might be a level of speculation I'm not qualified to make. But since then, right, Device has missed the tournament due to sickness. When we did Cluj, he had to leave the stage to throw up, which we were told not to say it, even though we said it. Astralis complained about that, and then Cadian said it in the interview afterwards. So, nice one, Astralis. You're great. And then apparently they all had diarrhea and sickness again, including Device, most recently at the start of Astana. So, far be it from me to suggest that maybe the guy who has like a well-documented medical digestive condition exacerbated by stress. Far be it from me to say you should be putting more stress on his table. But anyway, Kasper Strauber not only made that decision, Device also made the decision, and the players around him made that decision, and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, it was co-signed by Kasper Strauber. He came on to an episode of HLTV live at Copenhagen to announce it and do the whole thing, and it was like really contrived. It was like a Tom Cruise press conference in that sense, appropriate given the player. And then, after that press conference, I saw Kasper Strauber, and he tried to alpha me, dude. He came up. I was stood there to a bunch of journalists going, well, what a pile of shit that was, right? Like, And he came up and he tried to alpha me, and he went, oh, so it's you who says all the bad things about Astralis? And I went, yeah, that's me. Yeah, it's me. You have got me there. And then he said, well, what do you think about this move that we're making now? And he like held his hand out, so I shook it, and then he did this hand squeeze.
Miss me on all that.
Yeah,
I know.
he did the hand squeeze, and as he was doing it, I said, "Well, I think you're a fucking idiot. I think Device isn't going to succeed as an IGL. By the way, I'm still holding his hand. I think Device isn't going to succeed as an IGL. I think your fucking PR is garbage." And anyway, then he let go of my hand, and I went, honestly, if you're a performance coach and you can't put these things together, why are you even fucking employed? I'd do your job for half the money, mate, and I'd do a better job at it. Like, you're a fucking embarrassment. Anyway, and I've said that. And all the journalists are like turning around and like laughing, like, "Oh no, why can't Richard just be confrontation averse just once in his life?" But fuck these people, mate. They think they're gonna fucking stare you down. I'm right. I've been right about Astralis since day one. And by the way, what happened to the Device IGL thing? Total fucking failure. Oh yeah, okay. Another W for me. I'll take them all day long. So anyway, Astralis is definitely appointed incompetent people time and time and time again and paid them money. And unfortunately, I think, Nicolai Nyholm, obviously, if he's the one making the decision, he has to take a lot of that blame. But man alive, you can't legislate for everyone in Danish esports being a fucking moron. I mean, like, how can you legislate for that? But it turns out that's what he got. So Astralis, they're on the brink. I mean, where they go now is very interesting because obviously, if the sale is going to go to people, I'm told there's some interest in like the Middle East and other parts of the world and blah blah. But like, what do you do with the brand? And you've only got one team on the books now, and it's a CS team with an IGL on a short-term contract. I interviewed Hooksy at the event that I just did in Astana, and I literally said to him, this was on air. I said, like, what's the deal with your contract? Because you've done so well, is there a chance of, like, re-signing? And he said, bro, I don't fucking know. I don't know. They said, do you want to come play for Astralis? I said, yes.
By the way, the obvious linchpin that destroys the entire brand is if Device retires, you have nothing inside this org. You're not even buying anything at that point in time. You got nothing.
Well, I do have some interesting little info about that. One organization offered to buy the players, but not all of them, and that apparently has been rejected. They definitely want the players to go with the Astralis brand.
Right.
What I strongly suspect is that is like the value. I don't know if the Astralis
it's the entire value.
Now,
I mean, there is no Astralis brand value without the
but to Duncan's
legacy,
point,
right?
How much of that is Device? And let's be real. I've said this. I understand Device. He should be at like his age, his last hurrah, the last of his great form. And also being on an organization that's desperate to sell. People should be beating down the door for him. A world-class proven AWPer, tenure, but because of the health problems, they're not.
Sure.
And put it this way, for me, he's the ultimate fit for FaZe. I
think he'd be mega, yeah.
I'm
with you, though. The obvious thing that's scary is he skipped the majors.
Yeah.
So that just makes it hard to say do it.
Yeah, which I think there's more
signing.
to that than meets the eye. I don't believe. I can never believe anyone's skipping a major on health problems. That it would have to be something mega serious. Not to say it isn't, but I don't know if there was more going on there. But whatever. But for me, like Device is most of the value of the team.
Yes.
Right. Like, Stair had a really good tournament. Stair just signed a contract extension until 2027 with an organization that has been up for sale shortly after they negotiated that fucking contract. Like, if I'm him, I'm furious. If I'm his agent, I'm furious.
I know, yeah.
But anyway, he's had a really good tournament, and he seems to be in fine fettle, and he's loving all the attention and all of that. But he's not a big brand. And if, let's say, Device did get the deal and said, I want to go, and by the way, if that then goes to the investors and they go, what, we can get it like $800,000 for Device, a player with health problems who might not even go to a major, if we were ever to qualify for one again, sell him. We want the money. Remember, the investors want out at Astralis. This is it. It's all, we're done. Oh. So that sale would go to the board, and I imagine would be agreed upon. So what happens if Device says, listen, guys, love you all. Love you, Jabby. Right, love you, right, but I can't do this no more. I can go to FaZe, play with Carrigan again, or whichever org it would be. And I think ultimately,
Team Liquid could be a million, or G2. There's plenty of eligible orgs.
Ultimately, it feels to me that the investors are desperate to sell the org with the players attached, because obviously that does, you are getting an asset there as well as all of the IP and everything else. So if the players start wanting to go individually, the org, the price for the org is going to plummet. And so we will have to wait and see how that pans out. But I'm being told the players are getting a little bit antsy because of the uncertain future. They've just had a good tournament, just made a final.
By the way, one thing you're alluding to, Richard, as well, is another angle that I feel like is another obvious angle that people have mistaken on the Saudi one is, when did they start just buying more teams?
Yep.
Like, by the way, why not buy Astralis, relocate to Riyadh? There you go. There's immediate, sports option that's going to work. You're going to make their whole brand associated with the Animosity.
The House of Saud is filled with members who, might be interested in owning an esports team. And by the way, as it turns out, Valve are never going to make you disclose that ownership.
No.
You're never going to have to. Falcons, we still don't know who owns them. We do, but we have to pretend we don't. So Astralis could just as easily be that. again. So I agree with you. And by the way, as I said, when I say Middle Eastern interest, I am not just, of course, referring to Saudi. I am referring to the entirety of the Middle East.
Well, there's the other thing. A lot of them want to copy the playbook of the Saudis, right? A lot of the Qataris, they're next in line.
I happen to know
UAE was always slightly doing some stuff anyway.
In the sheikhs in the UAE, I happen to know that some of the younger members are highly involved in gaming and would be very interested in something like this. Very interesting.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you know, where, but also
there's more hidden danger with those sheiks than a Mad Lions chef. What you see? What I was doing? I was working on something there. Whatever.
It's fine.
Look it up.
But I mean, look, the reality there is, you know, how would the players feel about that? Would they want to play under those conditions with that ownership? There's also a chance, by the way.
Richard, naive. Richard.
I know.
I imagine they'd just go another. Can I just have another 5,000? Yeah, I'm actually okay with that.
You know, well,
I feel like some of them are like that, Richard.
Put it this way, you know, the Astralis guys. You know, I had the pleasure of talking to some of the players. Right, keep in mind, you know, listen, I don't give a fuck. You don't like something I said, whatever. But we can still hang out and have a beer.
Yeah, of course.
You can go online and say I'm a cunt and a liar and all that, and we can still have a bit. It's all good, right? So, you know, I had the pleasure of talking to them, and like, by the way, they've just their mindset now is like Astralis is such a detested organization that we represent. It's like being in Millwall. Everyone hates us. We don't care, and because when you represent Astralis, everyone's gonna have an opinion on you. You know, that's kind of what...
they're going to donk on you all the time as well.
Yeah, that's where they're at. Like, when we win, we're so back. When we lose, we're so shit, you know? So they've hit this galvanizing thing. I don't know if you noticed it with Stown. Stown has become a lot less timid. He's shit-talking in games now.
Right.
Him and Donk were going back and forth at it in the final. So, you know, like, listen, those players have they've got a collective backbone. I think they do want to stay together. The problem I'm also being told is I think a lot of the staff that are left, the skeleton crew, the longer this goes, they're going to be cut too. There's so much salary still going out. As I said, Zipnix is still being paid by Astralis, for fuck's sake, guys. I think that's about to come to an end.
I assume very well. Very well.
Well, even with the reduction, he got such a big bag on that 5-year deal, yeah. Yeah, but
no. If people don't know, as far as I know, though, even if he was on half salary, that would be like the salary that like a G2 starter gets. Like, as in his half would be their entire salary. Like, still nice money.
Yeah. So it's crazy. It's crazy how Astralis have kind of been brought to their knees like this. And really, the future is, you know, whoever comes in and picks up Astralis, you're going to have to do an entire exercise in essentially, which is funny given that if it is a Middle Eastern owner, sports washing, but you're going to have to wash the reputation of Astralis. You're going to have to like bring it back to the light and do a PR thing. That's why I laughed when apparently that calc, you know, from NIP, you know, he fucked up
Jonas Gunnarsson,
Jonas Gunnarsson, he fucked up one organisation, he leaves. He's in this investment group called like the Continuum X group or whatever it is.
Oh, perfect.
And they're Qataris. I believe they're based in Doha. So he has got access to lots of money, and he's going, maybe I'll bloody buy Astralis. Come on, you fucked up one org, mate. Walk away. Stay away, mate. Just
also imagine being device like he's back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, also,
Jonas Gunnarsson's back. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. So I mean, but as far as I'm aware, I don't know how serious a deal that is. I don't know if that was something to say to get the conversation going, or whether he was ever genuinely interested. But I mean, look, ultimately, we're getting to a stage now where if a deal isn't done soon, I'm told that they want to have it all resolved before the cycle for the Budapest major. So we have this very limited window. There is a chance Astralis could shutter, and it would be temporary. It would be temporary, but at that point, the players would be available for sale. Astralis wouldn't be operational. It would be no longer meeting its contractual obligations to attend events, and it would basically be just put on a shelf until somebody wanted to resurrect the brand again, as happened to it prior to that. So, it's sad. It's sad if you're an Astralis fan. It's sad if you're a CS fan, see one of the legendary brands in the toilet. But for those of us
it's objectively bad for Counter-Strike because of the zeal of, you know, Scandinavia and particularly Denmark for this team.
I mean, I'll just say this though: we move on. You know, like the great thing about Counter-Strike is because we've got such a long history, we've got this like 25-year history, you know, of the game, and, you know, really 20 years, 22 years of the esport. You know, we've got this long history of the game where we can look at brands that were great and are no longer around anymore. And occasionally an old brand that was great and then died, it gets brought back and it's good again. Or, you know, like ultimately, CS is fine without Astralis. It's sad for the history. But I mean, like, put it this way. Fnatic, anyone? SK Gaming? I mean, Fnatic still technically exist, but do they? You know? SK Gaming? Are they real still? You know, and these were foundational brands for the space. So we always move on. We'll always survive. I mean, I hate to say it, but Falcons are going to be the world #1 team. That's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, quite literally, the Team Thanos. It is inevitable that they will be the #1 team. They'll throw enough money at it until that just happens. Don't be surprised if there's even more crazy names associated with them post-major. Vitality. You know, we're already having conversations about are Vitality the greatest team of all time. You know, particularly if you only look at the lens of the end of CSGO and the start of CS, where we're at with CS2. You know, are they? So, do you need an Astralis? No, the reality is about esports, there will always be another Astralis. There will always be one team that rises to a level that no one else can get close to through their own hard work, their own excellence, just collecting talents together, and they'll have their time in the sun. And then, hopefully, if they're not chronically mismanaged, that time in the sun will last many, many years, decades even. But unfortunately, this is esports, where all it takes is one moron in a room full of morons. So, you know, that's life. But, I mean, I don't feel any...
Quite a fitting soliloquy on Nicolai Nyholm and his career.
Well, I mean, listen, he was probably the smartest guy in that room, but unfortunately that room was full of all the hand-picked idiots he hired,
Yes,
so it wasn't hard, you know, it wasn't hard. Maybe if he'd hired a few more no men instead of a few more yes men, you know, things could have been different, but that's life. So I don't...
By the way, though, shout out to all the Astralis fans for an entire decade telling me and Richard that because the team's winning games inside the server,
everything's
they're
fine.
making millions and millions of dollars and they're selling loads of jerseys of Device. And so it's actually the opposite and everything's amazing. And actually, we're just cynical haters who don't know what we're talking about. Yeah. As we, again, just sit down, say namaste and watch the bodies of our enemies flow down the river.
Exactly. And that's how
TSM, EG, it's like, give me a break, mate. At this point in time, what next?
But you know, it's like what I said. Don't judge me by my friends. Judge me by my enemies. And you know, we put a lot of them in also as well. It's like the other saying as well. You don't even have to fight your enemies. Just let them fuck up. Just let them fail. On a long enough time scale, you know, the best way to beat your enemy is to outlive them. And that's just what we've done the whole time. So, you know, I don't feel any great sadness towards what's going on with Astralis. And I don't hold high hopes that a new owner will be bringing this organization back to life. I hope the players land right, however that might look. Certainly, if they do have new ownership after the major, I hope this ownership sticks with this team, at the very least, and gives them a chance under new ownership and new coaching and new management, whatever it might be. But ultimately, the brand, if nobody bought it, you couldn't really blame them. Like, what is Astralis really synonymous with now? You know, the jokes, we call them Blast Astralis, we call them Astralis, Astralis. You know, it's over. Like, they've done so many things wrong and mismanaged so many things. They are a running joke of an organization.
They're literally, the last major was 2021.
Yeah. They don't qualify for majors. They don't win tournaments. I mean, get this. The final they were just in was their first, like, they were in a final in 2022. I think it was like a Thunderpick final. But then if you want to go even further back and like call it like not a major, but a big proper S-tier LAN tournament, it was like 2019 or something. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That's how far back you have to go. That's how mismanaged this organization has been. Not to mention, you've mismanaged an organization in a country where, despite a small population, the talent pool was unbelievably huge for so many years. All you had to do was just slowly ship of Theseus, the team, The legendary core. That was all you had to do. Just replace one player. Right, goodbye. Here's a wonderful
And
retirement.
I can tell if you ever look, one of the craziest things is, by now, they almost have signed almost every single name. It's just they did it in the wrong order at the wrong time.
They did it in the wrong
order.
order.
For example,
at the wrong time.
we all said when Heroic was around, why don't you get Cadian? Not later on when he was shit in CS2 and he can't hop anymore. So they did it all the wrong way. Even the Huxley one, we all said do that last year. I agree. What's a joke is, there's another thing people told us, Richard. Because of the success of the original 5 and then 1 or 2 players came in and out, because of the original core's success, people made it like, well, how can you diss the org? Because they inherited that team from someone else that was already a built team that was functionally able to potentially win the World Championship. I hadn't done it yet. All you did with your decisions after something like 2 changes was every decision you made led to where we are now. You took the greatest team ever and slowly dismantled them and did like reverse GMing, anti-GMing, until you ended up at the point you were irrelevant. Like, that's what the actual legacy of Nicolai and the Astralis will be. It won't actually, believe it or not, be the original success if you know like the history of CS. They didn't do a lot of that stuff.
Exactly. So, it's one of those. Ultimately, though, I think there'll be movement after the major. I think we'll have a much clearer picture. I think the really sad thing is the lack of transparency coming out of the organization right now. I've done a report on it. HLTV have done a report on it. Dust2.dk have done a report on it. Obviously, players have acknowledged it in interviews. It's like, don't just put your mans out there to fucking go to tournaments and like play under this fucking cloud. We've got Hooksy in now on a short-term contract. Let babysit our 4 players while we try and get a sale going on. Tell us what the plans are. Tell us who's interested. Tell us what the future looks like. By the way, Astralis fans are fucking annoying, but you they're your fans. Like, you owe it to your fans. I don't owe it to the Astralis fans to tell them what's up within their fucking own organization. They'll call me a liar anyway. Well, you owe it to them as an org, but there's a total shutout and a lack of transparency, and I just think it's really fucked up. Also, as well, I mean, like, a number of sponsorships are coming to an end. Like I talked in my report about how the apparently the El Giganten, which is a big tech retail outlet across Scandinavia, not just Denmark, I think they're in Sweden and Finland as well. But anyway, so that's coming to an end. You should be talking about all of this stuff. Like, at this point, there should be a degree of transparency where people are being told what the future of Astralis might look like. It's pretty important if you're a fan of the organization. Pretty important if you're still working there. So it's crazy, but I've got a few irons in the fire. There's going to be some probably more reporting about this coming soon. We will wait and see. But for now, I fully expect the organization to be sold for a pittance to owners that don't have a lot of esports experience.
Yeah, we'll circle back on that for sure.
No, sure.
So I think.
All right, Jen Psaki.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.